Wow, I'm beginning to feel very insecure between two powerful ladies. Anyway, good afternoon, fellow members of MAP, of course, the President, etc. Thank you, Ruth, for the introduction. Our MAP Energy Committee Chair and Vice Chairs emphasized the importance of asking difficult or hard-hitting questions during this forum, especially to our ERC Chair and DOE USEC for power. Perennial issues like red and yellow alerts need direct and honest answers in order to find effective solutions. That being said, we encourage our panel, as elucidated by our President, Rene, to be specific in their answers to develop actionable solutions. We need clear and concrete ideas to help us achieve our goal of securing our energy future, which is the very theme of our event. As the first question for DA Yusek Guevara, we took note of Secretary Lutilia's remarks during last month's PCCI Power Summit on June 19. He did mention that the DOE is looking at a number of things which can ensure security of supply, and these are the reserve market, renewable energy market, electricity futures market, and capacity market. The Secretary mentioned that our base load capacity is adequate except when it comes to El Nino phenomenon and extreme weather events. According to him, one cannot really predict to what extent the extreme events will affect our power systems in the future, but we have to make sure that the market's able to respond to signals. The yellow alerts and the red alerts are there, but there are signals to the market that additional capacity is needed. Yusek Guevara, could you briefly shed light on the Secretary's statements on how market mechanisms can attract additional generation capacity? And related, may we have a sense of timelines for implementing these market mechanisms?
Thank you for that question. The Secretary mentioned the capacity market and the futures market. The reserve market is just on hold for now, but we hope that it will resume very soon, maybe in July 26 or August 26, but we hope July 26. Now, the RE market, it's almost ready for commercial operation, except that we're just making sure that all the data are correct, and there are some missing data that we're trying to make sure that the submitted data is consistent. For the capacity market, the study will be starting maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks from now. So imagine the capacity market will start next year. For the futures market, that is a difficult hurdle because we realize that we need the SEC to collaborate with us. And the study for the futures market has already started. But even if the study is finished, we need to cooperate and collaborate with the SEC for that market to start. So yes, all of these markets are being put in place such that the market signal is heard by all of the investors. But you know, investors, we don't have a problem with it because we have a lot of investors who are willing to invest in the country, especially for renewable energy. The problem is, as I've shown in my slides, we have the transmission. We also have the permitting and consenting processes with various government agencies. Our hope is that the EVOS, once each of these government agencies get into the EVOS, it is going to be shorter. My latest example is the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. SIS used to be 1.5 years waiting time, and then 2 months for the SIS to be conducted. The waiting time now is just 2 months.
Thank you, Yusek. For the second question, I would like to address this to the ERC Chair, Hardy Malanta. In terms of pushing the envelope on energy affordability, does the Commission have a target rate per kilowatt-hour reduction aspiration? Or, additionally, what metrics are you considering to measure success in making electricity more affordable?
Thank you. Contrary to popular opinion, we do not have a target for rate reduction. I think people sometimes misappreciate efforts of the Commission and certain actions of the Commission, but we don't. We don't have a target for rate reduction because we still trust that the vision of EPIRA for a competitive, for competition leading to affordability can still be realized with the proper framework and proper mechanisms in place. So no, there's no target po on how we can, on the reduction, on the rates that will be reduced. But on the measure of affordability, that's one thing that we have been, that we started working on with NEDA. As you know, EPIRA uses the word, this is another catch-22. EPIRA uses the term least cost when it talks about the mandate of distribution utilities, right? Least cost in the supply of electricity to its captive customers. But in the Declaration of Principles, it uses the term affordability. Unfortunately, affordability is not necessarily least cost. So I think in 2022, we started working with NEDA on the metrics of affordability. Because least cost we can define. We can, there is a process-driven metrics for least cost, which is the CSP. But affordability is a different animal altogether. It is very subjective to a certain extent because it depends on the income of the person that is determining, is this affordable to me or not? So we are still working on that program with NEDA. And it's something I think that we need to work on with NEDA, with DSWD, and with the Philippine Statistics Authority because they're the ones that come up with the basket also of data to determine this. Pero work in progress po. Work in progress.
Thank you, Chair Di Malata. The next question is for the private sector representatives, Daniel Manny, Eric, and Ms. Cruz. Based on the MAP survey conducted from June 1 to 7, 2024, 71% of the 131 respondents said that the solution they consider most critical in addressing the challenges faced by the power industry is create policies that attract more investments in the generator sector to increase supply and lower power rates to consumers. What specific policies do you believe should be in place before, which should have been in place, or as soon as possible, in order to effectively attract investments in the generation sector and potentially lower power rates to consumers? Maybe to start, we'll start on the going to the right with the new
Thanks, Ernie.
president. Thank you.
Ernie. Can I just have a disclosure? Because I saw the slides earlier. I'm representing Meralco. I'm 1 week in my job. And I'm not, my role does not include being with the one big giant. My role involves being in the most irrelevant of the generators compared to the four, for now. Okay. So, anyway, I think one of the things, well, you Sageb, you mentioned a number of things that we'd like to put in place, no? And a number of them we've done. A number of the programs we're trying to implement. I think one of the reasons why there is lack of investments, no, is really it's difficult to sense the price signals in terms of the need for demand, no. With the secondary price cap in place, it's difficult to justify big investments in power when there are artificial ways to actually determine the cost of power. Unless there's we understand the true cost of power, I think it will be a hindrance in investing. So I think it's really, you mentioned about futures, the futures market. I think a forwards market is important because that will send a price signal on how much would power be, the real cost of power be in the future, you know. So I think that's one thing that's that should be in place. So a review, probably an elimination of the secondary price cap, but a review of the secondary price cap to make sure that it's fair and maybe really an implementation of the forwards market so that investors can have a view of how much power would be in the future.
Eric?
Thank you. Just to add to that, I agree with what Manny said. I'm not going to repeat that. In our book, I think the broad policy on renewables is a robust one. We're very appreciative of the RE Act, RPS, the GIA program, and so forth. It's really more on the one is the enforcement side. We know there's going to be a shortage in RPS compliance. What is the sector going to do about that? If we don't enforce this, then what good will the policy be? So I think that's an issue that will come up in the next 12 to 18 months. So something to think about. We don't want to take away the teeth or the enforceability or the viability of that very powerful policy. So enforcement is number one. Number two, I am both excited about the influx of renewables, both solar and wind. DOE states that there's going to be 1.9 gigawatts of solar coming in the next 12 months or so. I'm also terrified by it because excited on the one hand because it's clean energy, terrified because will we have enough transmission capacity and the demands that it will put on the grid in terms of stability and so forth. So I think the policy that we would need to get ahead of the curve is for the rapid scale up of battery storage. If we're going to have 2 gigawatts of solar and that's just the beginning, I can assure you that this will increase to 4, 5, 6, 7 gigawatts over the next 4 to 6 years. Imagine the impact on transmission, the frequency regulation, and the coal plants may need to cycle down. We've seen this in markets like Australia, which will lead to thermal stress, lower reliability, and higher cost. So we need to get ahead of the curve. Now we know that battery storage is still expensive. It's coming down. We have a battery storage in Australia. The levelized cost of storage is about 8.50 pesos per kilowatt hour just to store. That's the price in Australia for a 2R. I think it's going to be slightly cheaper in the Philippines. Call it around 7 pesos ballpark. We're undergoing studies for that. It's going to be expensive if we say, okay, let's do enough battery storage to complement the solar. You know that NGCP estimates 10 to 20%. That's more to stabilize the system. We think that we have to shift more, this so-called energy time shifting or ETS. I think we need a policy around that, perhaps a GIAP around energy time shifting for battery storage. And the good news is we can do it fast. Battery takes just 12, 18, 24 months to deploy. So we can really meet the surge of solar. Let's be proactive and not reactive. And one idea, perhaps since we have ERC and DOE here, one of the innovative ideas I think we can consider is, leave this investment for the generator who can then have two sources of revenue stream to lower the cost of the battery storage as opposed to the 7 pesos per kilowatt hour. Stream number one is the arbitrage, the differential between off-peak and peak WESM rates. Allow the generator to dispatch and take the upside and the downside risk, right? The historic spread between off-peak and peak is around 3 pesos per kilowatt hour. So that would subsidize already that 7 to 8 pesos of LCOS or levelized cost of storage. So all you need as a support, as a fee for that so-called energy time shifting, which is shifting 4 hours, let's say, of excess energy, be it during off-peak or during solar hours, to the evening peak, which is very expensive, will just be 4 pesos, 3 pesos. Again, we can have a study on that, but that's a very smart way. I think we need this policy to get ahead of the curve. Happy to discuss the details, but I think I will leave it at that. Now, finally, I think we need stopgap measures on thermal. We're big, we don't do thermal anymore as ASEN, but we believe that we need to enable more gas. more gas plants. The issue is it's only Meralco that's enabling the large greenfield gas plants. Meralco is only, 35-40% only of the capacity. But what about the 60%? How do we enable greenfield gas plants? I think we need a policy that will enable new greenfield gas plants. I'll let others talk about coal. We have different views on coal. We can leave that for later. But finally, we need also a stopgap measure, especially for markets like Visayas, where Yusek Gev clearly painted a bleak picture. I think we need to be pragmatic. Again, while we are big proponents of renewables, I think that rental units, temporary diesel plants ought to be considered, especially in islands like Visayas. Of course, battery storage and renewables, but renewables can be challenging in Visayas because of land issues and so forth. But diesel, I think, temporary, 5-year rental period, we do have some examples in Luzon, are quite critical as a stopgap measure. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Donna, before we go to Danette.
Okay. Hi. I would like to support actually what Eric said about the interest or the need to build more gas power plants. And I can attest to that because being the only producer of indigenous gas in the country, this is Malampaya. I have been approached many times really by potential investors in gas-fired power asking if I can guarantee gas supply to their potential investments in new builds. And because this is really the key thing that would unlock their investment. And of course, I can answer yes or no, but it depends really on what we find when we drill next year. But really, fuel is the security of fuel supply is the number one, I believe, consideration for building additional power generation capacity. And here's the other catch-22 that I'd like to add to Chair Mona's presentation. Investments in increasing indigenous gas or gas supply, for that matter, also requires long-term investment. And there needs to be a market that would underpin that investment. And us moving from a more captive to competitive market puts a bit of uncertainty to that sort of guarantee that we used to enjoy in the past. And maybe there's wisdom to it, no problem with that, because I do believe that diversifying the fuel mix, etc., does drive down the cost at some point and promotes competition. But what balance can we strike between competitiveness of the market and some level of guarantee or captivity? What is that balance that we want to strike to enable the investment? So that's really where I think enabling laws like the downstream natural gas bill that's being crafted at the moment, that's the Senate Energy Committee is championing, is really important because it sets out the key principles that would create that right balance in enabling a natural gas market. And I say natural gas here not just because I'm Malampaya, but because I also believe it's really the transition fuel. Within that frame, I would also like to make an advocacy for differentiation of the fuel, the gas sources in this downstream natural gas market, and that's indigenous gas. Now, I really believe that we must prioritize indigenous gas for so many reasons. And I have a list here, but I won't bore you to death with this. Number one is that, natural gas, as we all know, ticks all the boxes. I mean, it's the transition fuel. It has lower carbon emissivity than coal and other fossil fuels. Number two, and we've seen this happen recently during the heat waves and the Typhoon Aghon, it is climate resilient. Indigenous gas infrastructures are designed in such a way that it can withstand storms and heat waves. So it's climate resilient. The third point is that it's domestically available. We have a line pack. We have the infrastructure that could act as a storage for any immediate need for the gas. So if we have that kind of insurance in a way, it can also then enable, in fact, even the importation of LNG or coal. So for example, when we have to go out to the market to try and contract long-term LNG, we would want to create some flexibility there in the LNG volumes that we contract out for situations where we are unable to take it. For whatever reason, if an FSRU or FSU has to unberth or sustain long-term damage, where can you get that flexibility, right? So unfortunately, the flexibility that we request in long-term contracts would attract a higher price. And this is where domestic gas comes in, because it gives you that buffer in a way, or insurance or guarantee that this kind of flexibility you don't have to live with. So that's just one other advantage. Last but not least, really, it offers price stability. So the Malampaya indigenous gas price has been in place for 20 years, more than. It's designed in such a way that it's very resilient to market shocks and also supply disruptions. So we've seen that happen. I mean, there are charts everywhere that show how the price of Malampaya has stayed stable over the years, over COVID or whatever disruption in the Suez Canal, or labor problems in Australia. It stayed flat. So this price stability provides a cushion that pulls down any market shocks that are experienced by LNG prices, or even coal, as you've seen from the chart shown by Chair Mona earlier. So yeah, these are really, to me, some of the very big benefits of an indigenous fuel source that is really enabling for the rest of the fuel sources that have been discussed here. And so I believe really, at the end of the day, if the problem we have on generation capacity driving up or down the fuel cost, it's really, to me, a simple matter of supply and demand that plays out long-term and short-term. And I believe indigenous gas or indigenous fuel, in a broader sense, is the right solution, because it's in the intersection of energy reliability, affordability, and sustainability. That's all.
Enel, do you have any comments, please?
Thank you, Ernie. I will just preface my response with two statements first. The first is, I apologize in advance for the somewhat controversial things I'm about to say. I trust that Chatham House rules will be honored and that we are among friends here today. And the second is, like Manny, I'm 1 week in my new job. I represent Aboitiz Power. But I'm wearing my MAP hat today. And so I would like to explain that Aboitiz Power participates in both renewable thermal, is in the distribution sector, retail. So we're really not biased to any particular fuel. And you'll understand in a moment why I've said that. So here's my answer. The first thing I'd like to see is a Philippine energy plan anchored on a very deliberately selected loss of load expectation. I know a new PEP has just been released. It's very thick. I have it printed there in my bag, and I'm maybe 40 pages in. So I thank you, Sec Gav, for putting the highlights of that PEP up on screen. I think the one thing that sticks out is the absence of support for baseload coal. I'd like to advocate for a balanced energy mix where we use every technology where it makes most sense in our common pursuit to balance affordability, security, self-sufficiency, and sustainability. I'm happy to hear from everyone in the room that we seem to be aligned around that goal. The second point was to deregulate the deregulated sector. I think the design of EPIRA is to use regulation in some areas of the energy sector of the Philippines and market forces in others. Now, listening to Chair Mona, I realized that we have not made it easy for our regulators to deregulate the deregulated sector. So I commit to you, Chair Mona, to be as cooperative as I can to make that easy for you. You mentioned generators supplying their fuel data. I hope we are one of the generators that has been supplying that fuel data, and if we're not, you can count on our cooperation. I'm very happy to hear from you, Sec Gev, that we intend to create markets. She talked about the forwards market, a capacity market, which I think can address some of the concerns that both Donna and Eric here mentioned in the gas sector. and also that the reserves market will be coming back online, which, as we all know, is critical to support our clean energy future. My next ask, the third, is to regulate the regulated sector. I think in that area, as pointed out by Chair Mona, there is under-regulation. I think we need a rate reset in NGCP. We need a CapEx package approved. We need those lines built for the many reasons explained. AP being in the distribution sector, we face a lot of uncertainty. The possibility of retroactive rate setting, and I know we differ on our definition of what is retroactive, but the possibility that our distribution rates will be reduced and that will be applied to kilowatt hours already served. So we're actually eager to complete that regulatory process in order to create stability. And my last ask, number 4, which Yusek Gev touched on when you mentioned that SISs are now down to 2 months lead time. I think this is an ask that we could all agree on. We're looking for more speed. Hopefully the regulators can be quicker in dispensing a decision, right? I know that there is strengthening the ERC bill. You also mentioned amendments to the APIRA. I think there are a number of legislative changes in the pipeline that will hopefully capacitate our regulators to address all that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danelle. On that note, that we've heard from the private sector. Let's hear from the government sector's reaction. Chair, you were very insistent on wanting to say,
Insistent. No,
to answer the policies and next Yusek Guevara after. Thank you.
Thank you. No, because I was actually, when Ruth first invited me to this one, I said, parang interview ba yan? Ayoko na ng interview type. Let's have some discussions para exchanges talaga of ideas. So first thing that Manny said was about the review of the SPC, right? And I wanted to assure that it's on the way. There is a petition filed by PIPA. It's actually up for discussion by the commission in a few weeks' time. We're just the evaluation team is just finalizing their recommendations. And as I mentioned earlier, even beyond that petition of PIPA, the President already gave a direction on preparing a roadmap for the easing of the SPC in relation also to ARCOA. So I think we're all aligned in terms of direction. Of course, I don't blame you for being impatient. We are all impatient. These are things that, many of these things should have been done many, many years ago, but I guess the assurance is that we are working on it today, and it's not something that I hope that we will need to pass on to the next commission. That's my personal dream, that the baggage of the past will need to be resolved now, so that the commission that we hand over the reins to will really solve the problems of the future, and not just the problems of the past. The other point I wanted to respond to or react to was the point made by Donna about the challenge that contestability brings to new markets. And I think that's a very valid point. It challenges contracting if you don't know when the customers will be migrating. And that's why in the next few weeks, we will announce the long-term plan for ARCOA. So it's not going to be before the lowering of the threshold were done like on a piecemeal basis. We'll lower it now, and then a few years after, there's an announcement again of lowering of. This one will be planned so that we can all act accordingly. But I think the more important thing is that we have financing whizzes in the room. I know you guys from my past life, so I know this is what you do for a living. You think of financing models, new financing models, creating new markets. And I think, sorry po sa bankers, pero the industry has really moved on quite a lot. But I think our banking sector needs to also move accordingly. And if Yusek Dev and I were chatting about a roadshow I think DOE is thinking of coming out with a roadshow for financing, and we have offered our services. We can also help. The regulator can also help explain to our financing sector, and maybe we can come up with new models. We can come up with new ways of doing things, as I mentioned in the presentation earlier. We really have to innovate, because otherwise we will just keep on justifying status quo, and that has not been working well, is it? So let's try to find solutions. Tap again the whizzes in the room, and then finally. On the point Danelle made on deregulating the deregulated, I think we also wish for the same. But maybe the myth that I want to dispel is that deregulated doesn't mean unregulated. Okay, deregulated just means you won't need prior approval before you collect your price, or when you set your rates. It's not subject to the approval of the regulator. But to a certain extent, regulation will still be present, because we will be shifting gears to the competition side. So that's where we will focus our efforts on. So I want to, para leveling of expectation, it doesn't mean that, the generation sector can run wild. We will still need to enforce rules.
Thank you, Chair. Yusek, do you have any comments, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. Regarding the RPS, we realized that the 121 electric cooperatives have yet to be ready for renewable portfolio standards. And to that end, the DOE has been having IECs with them, and we have actually done the computation of their RPS for them, so that we are sure that they know what numbers to go for. But they are really having a hard time implementing it. But they are working towards RPS, because di pa lumalabas, but the RPS enforcement, we are going to have penalties of up to 100 million pesos and imprisonment, so that RPS can be enforced. So the co-ops are worried because they've seen the draft, but we're still working on that department circular, just to assure you that we understand that part. Now, the transmission concern on the rapid RE. We know that grid forming facilities are not yet being put in place in the country. When I asked NGCP, what is the strength of the grid? They looked blankly at me. Then I asked, what is the inertia of the grid? And they looked blankly at me. Then 2 weeks later, they said, we are beginning to compute it. That was 4 months ago. So we are looking at technical assistance to get the numbers computed. We hope that that study will be finished, so we'll know exactly where we are. But the Department of Energy, knowing that the grid is not yet ready for the amount of renewable energy that will be coming in, we have tailor-fitted the Green Energy Auction number 4, which is happening at the end of the year, that it's going to be renewable energy plus energy storage system, so that when it goes out of the plant, it will be a little bit stable, not as variable as without energy storage system. So that is a shortcut. I like that Eric is describing LCOS for batteries, and we also asked the NGCP to point to us where the batteries should be located, what should be the capacities of this. And maybe this is something that we can work with NGCP to strengthen the grid. Now, the stopgap measure for Visayas, we also requested NGCP to compute zonal reserves. You know, divide the Visayas into the 4 islands and make sure that there's an island-located reserve so that when the submarine cable gets trips, there should still be reserves for the island. You know, what happened last January in Panay should not happen again. But we were happy with the development of the CNP3 last April because it helped prevent any more blackouts for Panay during the high heat index season. Now, for the PEP being anchored on VOLL, I heard that from Danelle. You know, capacity market is going to be VOLL, so that's going to be a start. And I know that computing the VOLL is new to the Department of Energy. And you know, right now we are regaining our ability to do transmission planning. We realize that because of the concession agreement, the Department of Energy has just been approving the transmission development plan developed by NGCP. But we decided, no, we should have a strategic plan for transmission from the department, and the implementation of that strategic plan will be the transmission development plan. So we're getting there. I would like to think that it is possible to expedite the approvals of the PSAs and the ASPAs, because that would really make the job of the DOE much, much easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek. For the next question, this is addressed to ERC Chair Di Malanta and Yusek Di Binagrescia. Based on the MAP survey, 47.3% of respondents said that the solution to our problem is to streamline regulatory processes and approvals. How can the current regulatory processes and approval system be streamlined to fast-track development of energy projects? Would you like to start, Chair? And then we can go to Yusek.
Okay. There are several ways to skin the cat, so to speak. The first is really digitization and digitalization. When there's EVOS, of course, but EVOS is DOE administered process. Internally at ERC, we need to scale up digitizing our documents. A lot of the case files, Ruth is looking at me, reminding me of something. A lot of our case files are still in printed form under the table of the person who is in charge of reviewing them. So, if that person, and this has happened, that person is pirated by a GENCO and leaves, or not just GENCO, pwede rin pala DU, and leaves the commission, nobody really knows what is well, now we have strictly enforced before they get clearances for their departure. We have strictly enforced a turnover, not just a turnover list, but a turnover meeting to the next person who will work on it. Because before, when I came in, they will just leave it where it is without explanation of what is the status of this case and who will next work on this case. So we've started to address that by really focusing on digitizing our documents and coming out with new systems. I won't preempt our announcement, but we are coming out with new systems for filing. There's online filing already at ERC, starting 2021, I think. So 2021 onwards, there are electronic versions of the files. But pre-2021, and the ERC has been in place since 2002, I think. The law was 2001, past 2001. So all the documents 2001 to 2021 are still in printed form. Those are the ones that we're trying to address. So one is digitization. Second, on streamlining the procedures. We're working on data sharing agreements with other government agencies, including the DOE, the SEC, the DNR, because they are the other agencies that also supply the permits that are filed with us. So rather than waiting for the applicants or the stakeholders to file those documents with us, we will just access, so we will have access agreements with the other government agencies. So we don't have to wait for the filing. In fact, it's better rather than catching misrepresentations on certain permits filed. At least we verify directly with the source of the permits or the documents. So that's one. In terms of our own processes, EVOS has actually forced us to streamline our processes. Not just streamline, but document our processes, do flow charts for all our processes. So the Ease of Doing Business Act also forced us to do it. EVOS also forced us to do it. So it's very challenging, sir. The timelines are very challenging. People are working over the weekend just to comply with the timelines, and that's also one reason why we have a lot of departures from the ERC. I think same experience with DOE, because people are afraid to be sued, no? But that's the law, and that also is one of the challenges that we have in addressing the delay. But mandate-wise, we're also revisiting our mandate. For example, PSAs, it has been mentioned here, the delay in approval of PSAs, power supply agreements. One innovation that we have adopted, especially during the summer months where we saw a lot of our electric cooperatives and even private distribution utilities have high exposure to the WESM. So we checked which of these electric cooperatives and distribution utilities have pending PSAs with us, with a request for provisional authority. We prioritize them, and then the commission, because it's very hard to move as a collegial body. Yan, I always tell stakeholders that it's very hard to move as a collegial body. You have to convince not just one, but all, and they have to be in a meeting with a duly issued notice with a quorum for them to act, and then you will have to circulate the decision among all of them, and all of them have to sign and be happy with the version of the decision before you come out with it. So what we did for the PSAs is that the commission delegated that authority to me with very strict parameters on what I can approve on the issuance of provisional authority, and very limited time for the evaluation staff to also elevate it back to the commission for confirmation, so that it's faster. And then a template was also approved by the commission for the order. So it makes it easier to address. And we were able to address a lot of those utilities that are exposed 100% to WESM because of that innovation.
Yusek, your comments?
Thank you. So I'll get a new microphone because I might talk a lot here. So good afternoon, everyone. So if in case you don't know, ARTA is Anti-Red Tape Authority. So it's an agency under the Office of the President. So we were created under the Republic Act 11032, which is Ease of Doing Business, right? And the Efficient Government Services Delivery Act of 2018. So we have two mandates, no? So just to have a brief background. The dual mandate of ARTA is empowerment and enforcement. So I'm handling empowerment operations in ARTA. So what we do is we empower and help agencies to streamline their processes. And so we address different sectors, and one is energy sector. And the good thing about this is that DOE and of course ERC is our partner. So we've engaged with them recently to streamline EVOS, so Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop. So, but of course internally in DOE, they're looking into streamlining the platform itself, the process. As Chair Mona mentioned also, is that it's good that they're looking at digitizing, right? And it's always a mandate of ARTA, an advocate, is that you have to look at your process, streamline your process, and then go to automation, right? So So we coined it transformative digitalization. You transform first, and then you digitalize. So as I saw earlier, 47.3% streamline regulatory process and policy. So yes, that's our mandate. And we look at how do we streamline. So one way we do it is that we call the different agencies, right, convene together, and then look at the end-to-end, the holistic view of the process, from the permitting, to the eventually to operate the industry. So and so we have projects right now with DOE, ERC. Come October, we will have a streamlining workshop where we are going to streamline, of course, with the government agencies and select private sector to look at the ecosystem, right? So look at one service and then how do we streamline. The essence is very simple, right? So streamline whatever is the problem in terms of process. But I think I've heard also another approach would be maybe we need to think of it from a different model, business model perspective. Because streamline is just looking at the gaps and then trying to improve the old way of thinking, the old business model. Maybe we need to think of an innovative way, a novel business model. It may be a new process, right? Not really looking at the current, but then might be something that's out there, and then we need to benchmark it in the country. So there you go. So, I mean, ARTA is here to, well, of course, streamlining, but the other mandate is enforcement, right? So this is really where we apply the law, right? So in other words, this is where the legal aspect comes in, but we use that as a last resort, right? So I come in first as the carrot, and then I hope I don't need to pass to my other USEC, the legal department, for enforcing the law. But then if the need arises, we haven't seen yet in the energy, of course, I hope not, but then in the other sectors, yes, we have to execute that, and we did apply the enforcement aspect of the agency.
Thank you, Yusek. With the indulgence of the chairman, we're going over time. We still have about 4 questions to go, so with the indulgence of everybody, we'll just continue. The next question is really for Yusek Guevara, and again with Yusek Divina Gracia, on the continuation of the streamlining of the permitting process of energy projects. In particular for Yusek Guevara is really the EVOS. The EVOS was established to streamline the permitting process. How effective has EVOS reduced the bottlenecks and all overall approval times? Could you cite examples of breakthrough approvals under EVOS? And then I'll be asking Yusek Divina Gracia on the LGU permitting as our next question. Thank you. Yusek Guevara.
For EVOS, each of the process has a specific timeline. It was 5 days, 10 days, up to 31 days. And so far, none of the processes have exceeded the timeline that was given because everybody at DOE is afraid of the deemed approved pag hindi namin na-reach yung timeline. So far, we have not had any deemed approved cases. So we have followed it. But, EVOS is not just the Department of Energy. The NCIP is also there. And the other government agencies that have permitting that has to do with with energy sector. So one of the things that we have done with EVOS is increase the number of process engineers within EVOS. Because when the process comes from a different government agency, the process engineers go through them and figure out how to shorten and remove some of the steps that are not necessary. And to that end, some of those that have already enrolled their processes within EVOS are already the shortest time possible. Now, the difficulty is the LGUs, because they are kingdoms. They have their own process, they have their own fees, and they have their own requirements. So the Department of Energy is going to have a memorandum of agreement with the DILG and with the ARTA, because we think ARTA is in a better position to do enforcement on the LGUs. And we are hoping that maybe before the end of the year, these plans are going to be realized, and the difficult part of the process, which is at the LGU level, will become easier.
Thank you, Yusek Ibarra. Exactly the point that we were going to ask on the LGU permitting. I did ask Yusek earlier over lunch on a particular LGU, no? But anyway, could you please provide an update, Yusek, on the LGU permitting and integration into the EVOS? Thank you.
All right, thank you. So as mentioned by Yusek Kev, all right, so EVOS, Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop, right? So the last mile is with really the LGU, right? So that's where we've received the challenge, reported to us, complaints sent to ARTA. And we fully understand that the end-to-end process involves LGU. But that's outside EVOS. However, with ARTA, especially the LGU, there is what you call another platform or system. It's EBOS. So it's not EVOS, but it's EBOS. EBOS. EB, Electronic Business One-Stop Shop. Right? So it's a mandate in RA 11032, the ARTA law, that all LGUs have an EBOS. What is this? So it's an automated, streamlined process when you apply your business permits. Okay, when you apply your business permits, you need to be fully automated. That came about, definitely launched or realized during the pandemic. Because during the pandemic, we saw that when you're at home, you're disconnected to work with your LGU to even secure their services. So we fast-tracked it, even though the law, ARTA law, was launched 2018. Then the LGUs or agencies need to apply EBOS 3 years, within 3 years upon the launch of ARTA law. However, because of the pandemic, so became a little bit, we give them a chance to do it, to give them time. However, from 1,600 LGUs right now, the fully automated, based from ARTA's checklist on fully automated, only around 45, right? There's some semi-automated, right? And then some not even, they don't have an automated system, right? So, so we are fast-tracking that in terms of we have 8 regions cluster, and ARTA is deployed there, right? So we are working with DOE, right now, to have this workshop where we integrate the processes from EVOS, DOE's EVOS, to the LGU, right? So again, as I mentioned earlier, come October, we'll have that. It's already banked and it's already, but of course, even prior to that, we're working with DOE, especially with USAC Sharon Garin, to really look at how do we streamline. Most probably identify pilot LGUs, and then use that as a template, right? So it's easy, we can easily propagate it. But of course, on RE projects, because that's the priority right now, especially with the president. So there you are. So we're keeping track of it, keeping track of LGUs, and this is where we seek the help of course, private sectors, community, business chambers, because, I mean, as you mentioned, we are handling around 1,600 LGUs, 16,000 government agencies that they need to comply to RA 11032, the ARTA law. And we are just, 360, of course. So we have to be efficient in the way we do that as well, right? So again, we have a mechanism. If there are complaints, you can easily send to ARTA. Okay.
Thank you, Yusek. Actually, the next question was related still to the bureaucratic red tape, but I think you've already answered that. Unless the audience later on feels you want to answer more or you want to ask more specific questions with the USEC, there will be a forum for that. For the next question, this is for Yusek Guevara and Chair Dimalanta. Curiously, 40% of the respondents recommended allowing third-party involvement in transmission projects. What are the potential benefits and challenges of allowing third-party involvement in transmission projects? Yusek Guevara, you want to start a bit, then we'll follow.
Thank you very much for that question. Third party, we can also consider renewable energy generator companies as third party. And what we've seen in recent past is that the RE generator, because they want to make sure that they can connect to the grid, are actually the ones doing advanced construction of transmission assets, even providing sometimes the area for the substation. And it has worked fine. We think that there is an advantage in that the transmission asset is going to be ready when the generator is ready. However, when you say third party, that means maybe even the government can actually build transmission lines. There is a concession agreement that grants exclusively the right to expand the network to a National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. So I just had a meeting this morning with NGCP, and they told me they do not agree to the third-party construction. For the GenCos building doing the advanced construction for transmission assets, that is still a possibility with NGCP. But they flat out said no to the third-party build. We know that the advantage is that it's going to get finished on time. And by the way, if in case NGCP agrees to having a third-party build, President Anthony Almeida told me he had 3 conditions. Number 1, NGCP should approve the design, which is fine. Number 2, the builder has to be NGCP accredited company. And number 3, the cost of the right-of-way or land acquisition should be approved by the ERC. So, sorry, it's not a nice answer.
No, Yusek, actually, well, everybody knows this. We've been experiencing that. Eric and I built, with the group I was with, a transmission line from our wind project to the substation. It took us ages just to get it done. And, well, anyway, so it's still happening, and that's one of the reasons. Frank is laughing. I know, Frank, we also have the same problem. That, we're trying to work. That's why this is an honest-to-goodness forum, as indicated. So at least we know the problem is with another elephant in the room. Okay, thank you. Now
Since it's a discussion, I just want to chime in. I really wish NGCP, Anthony, were here. But at any rate, hopefully, Chatham House so cannot really share. But anyway, I echo what you're saying, Ernie. That experience of ours in 2014 is still happening now, where we build the connection point to NGCP, and it's not easy. And we don't know. It could be a resourcing issue because they're one company serving hundreds of generators and so forth. It could be. I also think that while there's a good intention for this draft EO and so forth, I wouldn't be surprised if that spooked NGCP, because it will now challenge or question their franchise, the nature of the monopoly, right? To allow a so-called third party to build instead of them, in the guise of, because they cannot build, speaks to, number 1, the ego or the reason for being. Number 2, how do you define their inability to build? It's in their plan and so forth. So there's a gray area, and there's now an issue of trust or confidence. And I see where they're coming from. Unfortunately, I think this has been muddling the situation. We have been working very well with NGCP in the recent past. We were able to connect a 385 megawatt solar plant in Zambales in time for this summer. It was 1 year delayed, never mind that, but at least we made it this summer. Again, because NGCP had to make certain adjustments in their substation. No? So it's not easy. We're just one among many projects. Now, it's more challenging, I think, also because not just of resourcing, but also the suspicion that if they allow us to do what we've been doing, is this going to be misconstrued as, you know, a third party and so forth. So I think they're being careful now, so there's an unintended consequence. So it would be great if you can really draw the line, take out that uncertainty of a third party earning a return on their investment instead of NGCP. Allow really to focus for the generators to connect to NGCP. I don't know if DOE can do something like a rep. I know DOE, like ERC, may be under-resourced as well. But this is really a critical point to address, because without transmission, we can't do anything, right? And we have plants that are sitting there waiting to be connected. We have plants that are being built. And again, you mentioned, Yusek Gev, the GIA plants being delayed and so forth. So I think to strongly collaborate with NGCP is key. And if we can really have a tighter coordination with DOE, sometimes nakakahiya, we don't want to throw NGCP under the bus, right? But at some point, we just need to seek help from a DOE. But if we can just standardize this, that there's a regular coordination, that it's business as usual, I think that will be a big, big help.
Thank you, Eric. The next question is addressed really to private sector IPPs. How critical is the development and integration of energy storage technologies in managing the variability of RE sources? We'll go down the line go ahead, Nani.
Thank you, Ernie. My answer will be in two perspectives. No? As a developer, to provide mid-merit capacity. In fact, Terra Solar is a major project that we've embarked on. It's the largest energy storage project, in the world. No? But first on the question of integrating energy storage with the system. I'll answer it in a perspective of who's causing the need for to address frequency regulation and who should bear the cost. Right? Frequency regulation is caused by variations in load, one, and variations in energy production, right? So VREs. No? Loads we cannot manage, or we really need to make sure that there's a product called regulating reserve to manage load variations. But when the renewable energy bill came out, if I'm not mistaken, when the IRR was drafted in 2009, a provision was included saying that variable renewable energy providers should be responsible for the balancing energy based on their day-ahead forecast, right? And that means when you're variable, you nominate, because if I'm the grid operator, if I'm NGCP, I want to make sure that I know how much you can produce so I can prepare for the following day what regulating reserve I'd be needing. So everyone needs to nominate their capacities for the following day. If you're variable renewable energy, you cannot do that. Once a cloud passes or the solar facility, it's going to be variable, right? But at that time, I guess the solution was only WESM. You buy from WESM, and that's going to be costly. So it defeats the purpose of encouraging solar investments if you're going to require them to be responsible in settling the balancing energy just bought from WESM. But today it's different. There is now energy storage, and I think it's responsible for an for a variable renewable energy provider, or if not mandated by DOE, for them to be responsible for the balancing energy. Because variable renewable energy, okay, I saw a number of so many solar installations. I guess you mentioned, Eric, 4 gigawatts in the future. No? That's 4 gigawatts of variable renewable energy. If we don't even consider, I'll use the word requiring, variable renewable energy to put battery behind the meter and regulate themselves, who's going to pay for the energy that will be needed to regulate that? all of us, all of the consumers. No? So I think in the integration, I think that has to be considered in the formulation of the policy. Also, one thing that that's coming up is that I discussed this with you, Yusek. No? A number of generators are proposing energy storage batteries to be used, independent grid-connected battery to be used for regulating reserves. Fine, they're fast-acting, they're great, no? But if we don't manage the penetration of batteries providing regulating reserves, what is the possibility, I raised this, what is the possibility that all of a sudden, let's assume that there's 1,000 megawatts of energy storage standing on their own, installed independent of each other, requiring charging, right? 1,000 megawatts. So all of a sudden, that 1,000 megawatts has not been in the demand projection of NGCP. So that 1,000 megawatts will be sucked by the battery. So it can be either a demand that's not projected or a load loss of 1,000 megawatts. So that's something that we need to understand, no? And see, really understand the impact, the technical issues behind energy storage. But I think putting batteries behind the meter for variable renewable energy, I think is something that we need to understand. But as I said, in our case, in Terra Solar, in MGen, we are providing the first product, no? The first combination of major solar facility backed up by battery to provide 850 megawatts of mid-merit. It's the biggest energy storage project in the world. It's the biggest single contiguous solar facility in the world, probably even visible in space. So hopefully delivered by March 2026.
Thank you, Manny. Can we switch it to Danelle for the answer? And then before we go to Eric, of course.
So I would go back to the Philippine Energy Plan. Yusek Gev, in her presentation, kindly summarized what we can expect in terms of installed capacity, both in the reference scenario and the clean energy scenario. And both of them have a staggering amount of VRE, right? Wind and solar. The case of 2050 clean energy scenario, between solar and wind, it's 100 gigawatts. So my response would be, I think I would like to advocate for moderation. I think we have to be very thoughtful about how much renewable energy we will allow to penetrate our grid. I think every additional kilowatt hour of variable renewable energy, starting from a penetration level of 0, is net beneficial. It brings down the cost of electricity, improves energy security, improves affordability, sustainability, all of the above. But you get to a certain point where there's an inflection point where it actually has the opposite effect, both in terms of security and affordability. Energy storage certainly is a solution, but again, I would advocate for moderation. There are different storage technologies. Batteries is just one of them, and as Manny rightly pointed out, batteries have to be charged. So again, I think we should think about to what extent are we going to allow batteries to penetrate our energy system. There are other solutions, pump hydros, obviously that will be limited by the topography of our country. So I would advocate for a balanced approach that considers both the demand for storage created by the penetration of RE, and then on the flip side, the type of storage we use, and finally, the amount of ancillary, the amount and the type of ancillary services that we deploy. There are kind of fast response technologies like impounding hydro, gas turbines that can respond quickly, and then finally for dispatchable reserve or backup, I think we need to, as Eric mentioned earlier, consider how much diesel we need in the grid. The nice thing about diesel, of course, is it's cheap to build, albeit expensive to run. So as a capacity that provides dispatchable reserve that's barely used, but is kept there to avoid loss of load, I think it's a suitable solution. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, happy to build on what Daniel is saying. I absolutely agree that in the long-term scenario where there's a significant mix coming from solar and wind, which we think is the right answer, but Daniel makes a good point that this has to be complemented properly by energy storage, be it battery or be it pump hydro. I think in the near term, battery storage is more actionable. It's quicker to deploy. The economics are there. You really just need to shift 4 hours, not 12 hours. But in the medium to long term, pumped hydro should be part of the mix because then if coal is really not going to grow, then how will you now firm or make reliable all these variable renewables? So I think it's all of the above. Now, and it takes more time to prepare, to develop, and to construct pumped hydro. So it's good to start early so that in 5, 10, 15 years' time, we're not rushing. In the meantime, again, credit to Terra Solar, and Manny, I'm glad you're there to really make it happen. No pressure by 2026, 2027. We're all relying on that. Mr. Valles here is relying on that so that they can comply with the RPS. So I think failure is not an option. Good luck, Manny. But anyway, we're big proponents of behind the meter, what the DOE coins as IRES, Integrated Renewable Energy Storage System. That's the most ideal answer because you're basically converting a solar plant to a mid-merit gas plant, except that your fuel is the sun and not gas. That's great. So no grid issues. It's efficient, it's stable, and so forth. And we were excited to see DOE coming up with GUP4 with an IRES component. That is effective for future builds. And I think that's the way to go. I would rather see bigger megawatts or gigawatts on IRES than as generated solar, which really gives me shiver. Now, we need to also address the existing solar plants that are being used as generated, the close to 5 gigawatts or 4 gigawatts of solar that won the GIAP 1 and 2, to the extent that they will be built, right? What are we going to do with those? Plus, the multi-gigawatts that are being constructed now, including ours, right? That is already partially contracted that we cannot enroll to the GIAP as IRES, right? What are we going to do with that, right? Because IRES will not be the answer for that. It will be the answer for future plants, right? So I would add to a nuance to what Manny is saying, which is, yes, behind the meter is good. Let's also think about beside the meter, right? Because we need to put battery storage beside the meter or very near power plants or substations that are causing the issues. And this is the advantage of battery because it's modular, it's scalable, and it's very flexible. Hindi namimili ng lugar. No, you don't need to have that elevation for pumped hydro, right? This one you can practically deploy anywhere, including your homes, right? We need a policy again, and this is what I referred to earlier as the ETS, the energy time shifting. You can apply that for behind the meters or existing solar plants that are contracted to whoever. If we can be incentivized to build a behind the meter because we're stuck and cannot bid in a GIAP because that's already contracted, we still want to hybridize them. So you sort of truncate the IRES into a full IRES, right? Which I expect to be, sorry, Chair Mona, but based on our initial simulation, this was last year, it was costing 9 to 10 pesos per kilowatt hour, LCOE. Now I'm hoping it's sub 9 because battery storage has already decreased. And guess what? And that's for mid-merit, 45% capacity factor, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and so forth. But if you look at gas as a mid-merit, it's not that far. You know, the price of gas, Donna, correct me if I'm wrong, but per kilowatt hour, effectively, it's around 5 pesos for fuel alone. That's at around $10 per MMBTU, fuel alone. If you put on the non-fuel cost or capacity fee on a mid-merit basis, that adds easily 250 to 3 pesos per kilowatt hour. So you're at 8 pesos already. At $10 per MMBTU at 59 peso exchange rate. But who knows what JKM or gas prices will be over time? There are projections that says $8 per MMBTU. There are projections that say $12 to $14. Who knows? That 5 pesos can be 7 or 8 on fuel alone, which means that gas can be at 10. It could be at 6 or 5. And then Forex. Peso depreciates 1 to 2% historically, around 2%, right? And that full gas, because it's a global market, will be going up as well. So I think at this point, this is a new normal. Nasanay lang tayo ng 4 pesos, 5 pesos for the longest time, but that's also driven by low interest rates and so forth. And I think hopefully the consumers, and I know that we have Citizen Watch as well, will appreciate that we are in, the old normal of a 5 peso generation rate is probably, not attainable anymore. We're probably in the new normal, and therefore, locking in, I'm not saying go all in on solar and storage and lock in at 9 pesos or 8.50 or what have you. That's part of the answer. That's a good hedge, right? But we should also scale up gas, even if there's a risk of that fluctuating to 10, 12 pesos. And then finally, on coal, again, Danelle, when you say energy mix, there's always at the risk of, putting the elephant in the room, coal moratorium, should it be lifted or not? I'm not going to answer that question, Ronald, but the point of view is, look, there are companies who still have permits, legacy, be it Aboitiz, San Miguel, DMCI, my good friend Sid is there. So it is actionable still if they wanted to. No one, I think, is stopping them. The question is it financeable, right? And what's the cost of capital? I think there's going to be a penalty or a higher cost of capital, a cost of insurance, and so forth. So we do know that the LCOE today of coal ex VAT is around 6 pesos per kilowatt hour. We saw that the data earlier. I'm not sure if a brand new coal plant can still achieve that kind of LCOE, notwithstanding crystal balling coal prices in the future, right? It could be higher because of higher cost of capital if it's available, right? Or the cost of insurance, among others, right? And the risk of obsolescence, or it's a 25-year depreciable asset, 40 to 50-year operating life. If you're going to assume that it's going to be probably just 15, 20 years, you're going to have to price it in. So I'm not sure that coal is the right answer, right? But we can test that with players who have the opportunity to build coal. So to me, I think which way you look, whether it's coal or gas or an IRES or a battery storage enabling variable renewables, we are in a new normal. The Meralco average generation price of about 7 pesos per kilowatt hour that temporarily dropped to 5 pesos, but we're gonna go up. That's probably a new normal, and but again, consumers and a regulator is still adjusting. It's hard to accept and to swallow, right? But I think if we let the market work really and have these policies, frameworks, enforceability in the systems, I think reliability and energy security should be top of mind. No? Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I see the eagle eyes of the chairperson looking at me because we've gone over time. Okay, sorry.
Hi.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, Orly Oxales, Citizen Watch Philippines. I'm the lead convener. Yeah, I've been listening to discussions, and Eric and I have been having so much discussions before the panel got started, and also with ARTA. Being a representative of consumers, as a consumer, all of us are always at the receiving end of what the power and energy environment directions are. And it's very clear from the discussions this afternoon since we started, is that the situation right now is that we are shifting our focus away from dirty coal towards to cleaner energy sources, right? And one thing that's very clear also, from all of these discussions today that it's not going to be cheap and that there's going to be a price to be paid. And apparently, what Eric just said, the new normal will likely be more expensive. Okay. So it is good that this earlier I've been hearing issues being addressed, like we do believe that as consumers, we understand that it is important to have a balanced energy mix, no? So that a strategy that makes sense, no? That will not shock our whole system. No? Because for consumers, no? What's important for us is when we switch on our switches, the lights turn on. Because we know the most expensive is when we do not have lights. It's the most expensive thing at many levels and many dimensions. Now, what I would probably like to ask, since our panel here is composed of the government, our power and energy players, the distribution utilities are here, and except for the transmission, as consumers, we're more interested really on what would be the safety nets given this environment. We're seeing a trend towards clean energy. We're all for it. No? We do believe, consumers do believe, that we have to go green. No? And it's a global phenomenon that's unstoppable, you're correct. No? But you would have to look. No? Everybody here in this room probably will have no problem in affordability. But the majority of consumers in this country are more concerned of the least cost. The least cost because for them, a 2, 3, 5 pesos increase in the per kilowatt hour rate in their bills is a cause for concern. Okay. Now, probably, if you will allow, is that what would be interesting in the discussion would be from the government's point of view and from our power and energy stakeholders here, what do you think should be the safety nets? Like, have we reviewed or rationalized the way the energy sector at every stage is being taxed? Is there transparency of the actual cost of power generation? Because for consumers, no, big or small, we always end up with our monthly bill that we have to pay. No? And what's really important to us is that our energy is reliable, it's stable, and to our level, it's affordable and predictable. And there's been so many issues being aired out. No? So, but on the part of that dimension of cost, what is the government and what are the insights from our power and energy sector friends here in terms of addressing that issue?
Great question, Ernie.
Yeah.
Is that a rhetorical question or a real question? That
I
we
think
should
it
be
was,
addressing?
I wish to apologize earlier, Mr. Rosales, for not asking your comments, but it's a very relevant question. It also affects a gentleman farmer. Because any increase is really across the board. No? So maybe with that, we can ask any of the panel members to respond.
Ernie,
Okay. Yep. Yes, Madam Chair.
we need to ask difficult questions, so we need to direct it to the audience.
Yes.
Pwede?
Uh,
Or,
Could-
Danelle, you want to say something?
could we, yeah.
Answer the question? Okay.
Okay.
Maybe what we could do is just quickly answer, because it's a very relevant question. And if, with the deference of the chairman, quickly answer from government and then from private sector. Just a quick answer, because we still have an open forum with the members of who attended. So please, thank you.
The social
Yes, sir.
protection in place is the lifeline rate.
we make sure that certain consumers who consume below certain amount of kilowatt hours per month would be protected. So that is one. And secondly, we have seen that if we electrify 100%, the 2 million households that are not yet electrified, the total investment on the side of the government is about 72 billion pesos. But we have a study that shows that there will be improvement in their income as well as expenditure to the tune of about 315 billion pesos if we are able to finish 100% electrification. And the rates that they are going to be given are the rates in the franchise area.
Just quickly, early, I think the answer could lie somewhere in the fulfillment of EPIRA, which is going down, the threshold going down to the household level so that we really enable full market competition and less regulation. No? And hopefully there is a path towards that. Having said that, there are some caveats I just want to raise so that the industry can prepare for the rough road ahead in terms of the household level. One is execution. Getting those smart meters, it's not going to be an easy thing to do that infrastructure to allow full EPIRA implementation up to the household level. Number one. Number two, I think there needs to be a change of mindset among investors, present company included, among the generators, because we have come from a world with this utility base that there's a 20-year, 25-year, whatever, long-term PPA before you build a plant. Well, in the fullness of EPIRA at the household level, there's no such thing. You take a stand, right, that you're going to have sticky customers, tumaya ka, whether it's coal plant, gas plant, renewable, IRES, etc., or buy or build. We need to make certain decisions. That's a very different ballgame versus the rules that we play today. And the banks too, and so forth. We need to prepare for that. Otherwise, what we're concerned about is that there will be a freeze, a culture shock, that, oh my gosh, where's my 25-year PPA with my customer? We cannot have 25-year PPAs with a household, right? So I think we need to prepare for that. It's a concerted effort, both from an investment philosophy and risk management perspective, as well as from an execution, technical down to the installation of smart meters perspective. No. But I think, Early, your question will be best answered if we can really get to real competition down to the household level. Let the GenCos or retail suppliers compete, and you should, in theory, get the least cost. But easier said than done because there's still a lot of barriers to be hurdled.
Thank you, Eric. Just a last answer, Chair.
Very
would like
quickly
to-
lang po. Just taking off from what Eric said. That's why I showed in the slide earlier, and I referred to it as the bright spot, no? At what's looking at the light at the end of the tunnel. If we're going to look at the data from the retail market, it's really showing signs that better rates come from the ability of the consumers to negotiate directly. So the signs, and it's just 40% of the eligible market that we have so far mobilized to use that power. So that's really where I think we're headed. But it comes with a demand, with certain challenges and demands also. And we've seen this over the last 2 years where disputes have arisen from those certain contracts, which we think could be addressed or should be addressed by a better education campaign to enable customers and equip them with the proper, Eric was talking about mindset earlier, proper mindset when they enter into this contestable market. This is not like buying a new merchandise or a new car. This is a totally different procurement exercise, which maybe consumers, no matter whether they are part of global chains, and we've seen disputes with customers that are multinationals. So it doesn't come with size. The ability to negotiate clear, decisive contracts, that's not naturally come with you being a big company. So we need to work better, and I'm talking about we, the ERC, and with the private sector, better educational campaign enablers for that shift. The second part, maybe the issue on safety nets. I mentioned that earlier din po. Because as I mentioned, we've seen in other jurisdictions that have deregulated, there are really mechanisms for safety net. For example, for residential consumers that have not migrated, there are default rates that are adjusted either on a quarterly or semi-annual basis, so that even if they don't negotiate, there's a certainty as to the rates that they will pay, and it's set by the regulator. And the supplier is not trapped or hostage because they know it will be reviewed on a regular basis and set on a regular basis. What's better is if there are automatic adjustments to it and it's just confirmation, right? Which is something that we're also looking at for the secondary price cap, so that it's more dynamic response to the time. So yun po, we're really conscious of that when we do the full deregulation.
Thank you, Chair. On
Mr.
that
Chair.
note, before I lose my job, I'll turn it over to...
Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay. Privilege of the Vice Chair, I will defer.
May I be recognized? And just
Yes,
give me a
sir.
chance to answer that
Okay.
question.
Sure, Daniel. No problem.
Eric, apologies in advance.
No problem.
So you mentioned that LCOE of coal you don't think can be kept in the 6 area. I think with proper planning and putting together a well-conceived energy product, you'll be surprised how low we can get the prices. We just signed a long-term contract with Ayala Land, which I'm sure you're aware of, and the price is in the low 4s. And we were able to do that because we did a combination of renewables, solar, as well as coal, from very efficient, large, low CV coal burning plants where you and I are partners. No? So actually, I think there is a way to balance all these objectives, and numbers like that, 4+ are possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Madam Chair, the floor is yours. And
Okay, gabi na. But, so, I think President Rene Almendras wants to give a 1-minute reaction.
Sorry, Yusek Geb, I'm very concerned about your statement that said NGCP said no on the call for better transmission. I think it's becoming obvious that there is a lot of people who want to build generation plants to solve our problem. You showed us a chart. I don't remember exactly when NGCP concession is going to expire. But having come from the water sector and the excitement in the water sector in the last administration, somebody did tell me that when a contract is prejudicial, it should be negotiated. But I do have friends in NGCP. What if we offered NGCP several options? One is, if a transmission line needs to be built, we'll give you first dibs. Why? Because you're the concessionaire. But if you can't build it, let somebody else build it. Anyway, you do not lose the monopoly because part of that condition is an option to buy that transmission asset at any time in the future by refunding or paying the guy who bought it, which ERC can determine, ma'am. The cost per kilometer of transmission is set. So it's not asking them to give up the monopoly. It's simply saying if you have limitations in capital or capacity, let other people build it. When you're ready to buy it or you want to buy it, buy it. If not, leave it there. Then the independent transmission provider goes to ERC, asks ERC, give me an approval for a wheeling charge for this segment, which can be pre-computed based on cost, based on returns, and based to. Therefore, you can also project future pricing of that asset in the future. And just to control the issue of where to build, because you cannot have everybody build, the DOE has the right to supervise. I'm trying to remember the IPIRA, ma'am. I got my IPIRA lessons from the author, Senator Osmeña. 2 days of lectures with Senator Osmeña. We have the right in DOE to object to or not approve the grid development plan. right? It's not automatic that just because they submitted it, we approve it. And my understanding was the original intent was to allow the DOE influence on the grid development plan because the mandate of the DOE is to provide electricity. So my view is if there is a project that does require a grid, the DOE can determine that this is a necessary grid. And that will trigger now the option that says, NGCP, build this grid. If you can't build it, let somebody else build it. And at any time in the future, you can buy it from the same guy. ERC determines the pricing. ERC will determine. I worry about the contractor has to be an NGCP accredited contractor. I'd rather have the contractor be an ERC recognized contractor for pricing and other stuff, and a DOE certified certification as far as technology or competency is concerned. Sorry, ma'am, it's not a question, but I worry about the fact that we're going to have an energy shortage simply because one player is not able to create the platform that will link the guys who are arguing, which is the generators and the distributors, into the grid. Thank you very much, po.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Okay, thank you. So privilege of the Vice Chair, Ronald Valles. And then we'll have Cora. And then whoever wants to ask question, can you just line up over there and
Thank you,
Identify.
Madam Chair. I specifically requested Madam Chair to give me the same privilege given to the other Vice Chair, the Danela Boy. So anyway, I have actually 3 questions. I'd like to ask all of them now. Baka di na ako payagan ni Vice Chair later. So the first two questions, all of these questions are addressed lang to the government. No? And I hope this qualify as difficult questions. No, these are more specific questions relating to the business where I belong. So for the chair, again, just a follow-up on what Danela Boitis earlier mentioned about the rate rebasing. No? So we would like to find out from the chair what is really the plan and what is the timeline for the rate rebasing to be completed and to be accomplished. Kasi ang dami na naming naririnig about this. This is all in the media. Everybody's asking about when will this be completed and when will the rates of Meralco change. No? So what is the exact timing for this? It's been almost 10 years for Meralco. Started 7 years and there's been a decision. And then we're going into another 3 years of delay. And there's no decision yet. This has impacted seriously on Meralco and the consumers because we don't know what the rate is. And for the past 10 years, we've closed the books and we've spent for our capex and opex, and we paid the taxes. And it's very difficult for us to later on change the rate, and we don't know what to do with all the payments that we've made already to the government. And worse, if there's a price adjustment or an upward price adjustment, I'm sure the ERC will not allow an upward price adjustment to retroact 10 years for the past 10 years, right? So parang double hit sa utilities. Refund ka na, hindi ka pa makarecover ng taxes, and then hindi ka naman makasingil ng upward adjustment. That's one. Second one is a clarificatory lang between the functions of the DOE and ERC on the delineation ng responsibilities so far as PSPP is concerned. PSPP, the Power Supply Procurement Plan of Distribution Utilities, is approved by the Department of Energy. Our dilemma is this. The PSPP clearly indicates the capacity that we intend to procure and the timeline for the commercial operations date, the timeline when the contract is supposed to be operational. But when we submit the PSA, assuming the CSP has been completed, of course, we proceed with the CSP only upon approval of the Department of Energy of of the DOR, right? So when we complete the CSP process, we go to the ERC, encounter delay in the approval. So the timeline already is disruptive, not followed. And then, of course, sometimes you encounter a situation like what happened to us, where we applied for 1,200 megawatt capacity. That is what we need. What is given to us is 910. But what was approved by the Department of Energy in the TSPP is 1,200 megawatt. So I'd like to know if the ERC can really change that capacity and the timeline as approved in the PSPP, or is it more on the terms and conditions of the PSA and the rate. Finally, for the DOE, again, Yusek Guevara mentioned about the penalty and the imprisonment for non-compliance with RPS. Medyo natakot ako doon, mama. Yung malaki yun. Baka maparetire ako ng maaga doon. So as you know, we are undergoing a 500 megawatt CSP for RE, di ba? And that is in compliance with your RPS requirement. But my question is, how do you intend to strictly enforce the RPS requirements in the absence of the RE market? Kasi pag wala yung RE market, renewable energy market, kasi kung RPS, di ba, you cannot get the RPS from the contracting party, then you buy it from the market. Supposedly, there should be available RE certificates from the RE market. And what happens if there's no RE market, or what happens if the RE generators do not sell their RE certificates to the RE market? So that leaves us without any certificate, and baka sabihin nyo, non-compliant kami at baka tulong nyo kami. So that's the dilemma. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Attorney Valles. The first question is in relation to the rate reset, no, or rate rebasing, as you call it. Siguro I'll answer that two ways. One, Chatham House rules, ha? So one, you said that there has been no reset. There has been no upward adjustment, because it's true. Even with your application, the final rate was reduced by 3 centavos, I think, by the commission. So, but I guess ito yung one of the mysteries I alluded to in my dissent on that case. If there was really a need for an upward adjustment, Meralco's application offered a 40 billion peso refund. So maybe there was really, you did not see a need for an upward adjustment for that period in time. Now, to address the timeline for the rebasing, timely because today, this morning, we actually discussed your motion for reconsideration. So in terms of the timeline, it will be forthcoming. Of course, I cannot discuss what the final resolution is, but in terms of timeline, it will be forthcoming. So I made sure I finished this because I had the feeling you were going to ask what are... Okay, hindi ko din talaga i-disclose. Okay. On your question, on your second question about what is the scope of what ERC can do with respect to the PSPP and the CSP, the PSA resulting from the CSP once filed with us, I don't think I'm in the position to say what, because our understanding of what we can do is what you saw in our order. So we wouldn't have acted that way if we thought that was beyond our scope. So I don't know if Yusek Geb would want to answer that question in terms of what the ERC can touch once the PSA is filed with us. But my answer there would be, in terms of our decision, it is as we decided.
Regarding the PSA, you're right. It is within the ambit of ERC to approve the PSA rates. I think the question, Chair, was about the PSPP. because the DOE approved, but you did not change it, right? So I don't know.
We don't touch the PSPP. But your point on the delay is valid. Kasi syempre may timeline yung PSPP. If the ERC takes too long in reviewing and approving, then it messes up your procurement schedule. I agree with that. And that's why we're really trying to address the issue on delay, which is not present just in PSA, but in almost all the cases that are filed with us.
So yung tanong mo sa PSPP, we'll check. Kasi hindi ko talaga napansin na nagkaroon ng change eh. We'll have it checked.
But what I'm referring to as the change was the application that covers 1,200 megawatt as approved in the PSPP, but the approval was limited to 910, right? But we have an approval in the PSPP that it's supposed to be 1,200 megawatt. So I wanted to find out if that is part of the...
Pero naka-MR po ba kayo? Nag-MR?
Yes,
O sige,
yes.
wag na po muna natin pag-usapan.
Oo. Difficult question.
Yung sa third question mo, di pa naman kami nag-public consultation about the DC on penalties for RPS compliance. Of course, we will make sure that the RE market is in place when that the Dartmouth circular becomes in effect. But you can speak during our public consultation.
Oo nga naman. Hindi na Chatham House rules. Okay na. I think, Cora, please.
I'm more known as an environmentalist, but I am an engineer economist with coursework in my PhD on renewables and thesis on nuclear power plants, funded by the U.S. Electric Power Research Institute. Short question and a little bit longer commentary. I did not hear, I think, enough about energy efficiency, although I think we have much wastage still that can, if we put them all together, can be equal to one power plant, at least. Now, my commentary is, I think there are long-term issues that we really have to think about now, which go beyond the responsibilities of the two government offices here, DOE and ERC. They are R&D and education, and there is much competition for energy resources to be allocated to these two functions that have more long-term impacts. But we are talking about long-term now. There are three basic capital forms that are needed to develop anything in any sector. One is the one that is measured by GDP, manufactured goods and services, including technologies. Now, on technologies, we're now doing a lot of technology transfer, getting technologies developed by other countries. My request in the listing of criteria that we have is that we demand that the supplier of the technology that is new, that is being offered to us, should at least show that there is an operating model already in the country of origin. There are many SMR suppliers coming in that do not have anything operating in their country of origin now. And by the way, I think it should not be called SMRs because modular is not that important there. It should be called SNR so that we do not forget that we are dealing with nuclear reactors. The other one is natural capital. We just have a new law, the Philippine Ecosystem and Natural Capital Account System. And I think it is important for us to pay attention to identifying and accounting for our natural capital for this sector. And we do not have that yet, especially those that are water-based. I hear this fake news that we have uranium in the West Philippine Sea. I checked that with Lau David, who heads the UP Marine Science Institute. Do we have that? And she said, well, we have it. Every time you test a sample of water, you can have traces, but it's not of commercial quantity. So I think we have to know what we have so that we can direct the R&D resources that we will get from government to those which can make us leaders in these areas of energy, right? I think we have to move from technology transfer to technology transformation, that is collaboration at the level of knowledge. Instead of just getting finished products from them, I think we have to demand that those who are offering us services will include training of their people who are doing advanced technologies with our own people, because we have a good science and technology community here already. We have, for example, somebody in Oak Ridge National Lab who is a Filipino that is doing good research, and we need people like that to come back and help us. The other one is on human capital. We used to have quite a number on nuclear power trained, but then I think we really need to demand more allocation of resources, because on STEM, for example, we are so behind other ASEAN countries. So where shall we get those people whom we shall need to develop these technologies for us in the future, right? Those are the things that I think we need to focus on, starting with energy efficiency, because I think that will be the cheaper one to focus on.
Thank you, Cora. Are there any other questions, comments? Sorry, the lights are facing us, so we can't see who's raising the... Art, sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. Art Aguilar, Biopower Group. I'd like to bring up again the question of right-of-way. I'll give you an example. When we were putting up a solar site in Negros, now owned by Ace and Eric, we had to put up a 13-kilometer line. And since we couldn't wait for NGCP, we had to get a task force of about 8 people with laptops and cell phones. And for about 9 months, intensively, tracked 104 landowners, all the way up to the US because of, the MASA system of mass ownership in Negros. And finally, we put it up across rice field, some barangays, and I think Sugarfin. I'm bringing this up because in contrast, when Biopower, which is the largest biomass power producer, had 3 brand new plants, and Eric is very familiar with this because he was part owner, we could not, with 1,000 people, energize our brand new plants for more than 2 years because the transmission lines of Negros were used by 2 coal plants in Panay on their way to Cebu. And the sugar mills in Negros, like Victoria's, Hawaiian, and Discom, Jo Marichan, had to wait for years to be able to get to the grid for their cogen. When we had repeatedly asked NGCP what the problem was, they said right of way with the hacenderos. We had offered many times a multi-sectoral group under the auspices of the provincial governor to sit down together with the sugar mills, but they talk to their own sugar planters, to open up this right of way. I'm bringing this up because I think to be able to get a breakthrough on this right of way with NGCP, we need 2 solutions. One, there has to be an internal reorganization in NGCP. By the way, I'm the guy who transferred the whole transmission system to NGCP one midnight, 22,000 kilometers, 42 substations, when I was in Transco. My get out of jail card is because it was Pisam who sold it, and we were just managing the merchandise that was being auctioned. So my suggestion is we look, or ERC can look into the internal organization of NGCP, because when I queried them many times, there was no project manager in Negros for the CNP, which was delayed 6 years. So there's an internal problem there. But more importantly, as brought out by Secretary Almendras, is also the problem of right of way with the courts. We had senior justice here. Maybe ERC can work out, or DOE, with the judiciary, with the executive judges, so we can have a way of speeding up the exercise of eminent domain by NGCP. Because there has to be an algorithm that is just a check-off, because we already have the legislative power of eminent domain, that it is held up by the local town sentiments, or the area, or the landowner has influence. And this holds up whole projects. I mean, many of us have many projects being held up because of right-of-way. So these are my two suggestions. The other point that I'd like to bring, if I'm allowed, the moderator, is the question of the cost of power in the country compared to other countries. We're always compared that our cost of power is higher than those of other countries. We are told that our neighbors have power sectors that are subsidized. We tax. We are all taxed VAT if we're not RE. And that VAT goes in the value chain down to our Meralco bill. And so part of the conversation has to be whether we really want to continue to tax our energy sector, especially when our competitors for FDI, Vietnam and everybody else, subsidize one way or the other. So these are the two suggestions that I would like to put forth in this panel. Thank you.
Go ahead, yes, sir.
Art, a quick comment about the taxes. We are in the process of commissioning a study just to figure out where are all the taxes magmula sa upstream all the way to the downstream. It will take about mga 8 months to 9 months to do the study. But we hope that we'll be given a chance to present it to the Department of Finance. Because what we would like the Department of Finance to look at the energy sector as an enabler rather than a source of income. Thank you.
Art, just a side comment on that. We've been trying to do that in MAP. And for 3 or 4 administrations. And Basta is smiling because we've been fighting for that ever since before. Because the energy sector is the most heavily taxed. The problem with DOF is every time we talk to the secretary or USEC, they always say, it's easier to collect from 200 generators than to collect the same amount from 1 million taxpayers. That's the brunt of, right, Buster? So it's batting your head against the wall, but I agree with you totally. And that's one way of making our industries competitive. That's why one of the things we were proposing was to use the Camago Malampaya funds. Buster's laughing again. This is another initiative we've been trying to get them to subsidize export-oriented industries. So at least we can try to be competitive with our neighbors. We've been trying and trying and trying and trying. But, let's just hope. There's still hope. But anyway, I understand. Chair also agrees. DOF, it's a non-starter. Because again, anyway, go ahead.
Hi. My name is George Yulo. I'm actually a part of a group that entered the power sector trying to make a small bite into the system. And we were fortunate to be given a SEOP for 320 megawatt in Pangasinan about 6 months ago. And after that, we thought that would be smooth sailing. And I just like to echo what Secretary Almendra said, because we've been trying to get the SIS, and unfortunately, when we realized that we're being given an SIS on a location, a substation, which is like very far away, And by the way, they don't know when they're going to be built. So I just want to stress the challenge of the players. And you yourself have mentioned you've awarded so many operating contracts. Why is it that there are challenges? So I think just reiterating that point. Secondly, I'd like to borrow, and I like what Yusek Divina Gracia said, a new paradigm. Because all the discussion we have today, which by the way is very, very educational and answered a lot of the question in my head. But just like what the previous speaker said, we're being compared against other regions, just even within the ASEAN, right? We have the most expensive power. I live in Hong Kong and the power there is all nuclear. We continue to streamline what we're doing here within the bounds of the spirit of all the players. Are we not going to get out of the box and think of something better? Because I understand in other countries we're talking about 2 cents per kilowatt, generation. We're talking about the most, the cheapest, what's 4 pesos? What is that? 6 cents, 8 cents? So we're too far away. So in that light, may we hear what's the plan on nuclear power? Because it looks like even other countries have started to revive nuclear power.
Nuclear is in the energy mix by 2032. But, it will have to be private sector led and supported by the Department of Energy and the other government agencies. Pero nasa step 1 pa lang tayo. We need to get the law passed for the regulator. So once that is passed, we can start talking about developing the industry. And nasa Senate naman na, and we're hopeful that maybe by the end of the year, that law will be passed. And we can start talking about the actual development of the nuclear power industry.
Any other questions? Prof. Wally, yeah.
Prof. Wally Del Mundo from University of the Philippines. This is more of a suggestion, recommendation, not really a question. It was good that the loss of load expectation-based power supply planning was mentioned earlier, and I support that. I would like to recommend to also conduct the optimal power system reliability level study. The last time our country did this study was in 1991. The study is about loss of load, what is the level of loss of load probability, and after that is what is the level of reserve requirement to meet that loss of load expectation. In 1991, the outcome of the study, which was commissioned by NEDA, the National Engineering Center of UP did the study. I'm happy to be the lead person who conducted the study. It was 1 day per year of loss of load expectation. That means that our country would have better economy if our power system, particularly the power supply, the generation system, will only allow 1 day per year of a loss of load, a brownout that is caused by an outage of power plant. Now, but that was 1991, and we have not conducted any until now. That is actually balancing affordability, reliability, and sustainability, because the optimal level of reliability is balancing the loss of load. That means if you do not have electricity versus building more capacity to meet the demand. And I'd like also to highlight, as I observed earlier, it was presented that the reserve, to me, it appears to be constant despite the increasing penetration of variable renewable energy. I believe that with the variability and intermittency of the variable renewable energy, such as solar and wind, the level of reserve in terms of megawatt capacity will be much higher for the same level of loss of load expectation. So that means when we do this, the planning, I recommend that, well, number one, as I would like to repeat, conduct the optimal loss of load expectation and then use this loss of load expectation as a criteria to determine what is the increasing number of reserve capacity to ensure that we have a secured and sustainable, reliable power supply system. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I think Chair would like to answer.
Thanks, Prof. Wally. And I'm happy to report that actually we've just engaged with the support of USAID a study on grid reliability po. So we're expecting the results by, hopefully, kung walang delay, by the end of the year, that grid reliability study will address the points that you were asking earlier, including the reserve requirements with the expected increase of VREs in the grid. So we're at it. We were initially hoping the NGCP would take it up, but kung hindi kaya, di pinagawa na lang po namin sa consultant. So, meron na po yun, ongoing na. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes, go ahead, Alex.
Alex Ablaza, I represent the energy efficiency sector through PE2. Possibly some thoughts or questions for both you, Gev, and Chair Mona. We've been trying to bridge all our supply deficits with supply-side solutions, but we haven't put a number or targets on demand-side solutions. So there are many ways. Yusek Gev had this beautiful red curve that was projecting peak demand through the next decade. And we believe in PE2 that if we are able to shave off 182 million tons of oil equivalent, we could actually have permanently bring down the curve by as much as half a gigawatt to a full gigawatt per year. If we really are cutting across all end-use sectors in the enforcement of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. And so that's number one, peak shaving to bring down that red curve across the projected years. And then second is load shifting. So we feel the valley. And there are two ways of peak shaving and load shifting. In each day, it's always the late morning, afternoon, and then the evening peak, especially for urbanized centers. And if we transfer that load by incentivizing load shifting technologies on the demand side. And there was a time when time of use differentials were so significant that people were already, or end users were already experimenting with thermal energy storage, battery storage, and now kinetic storage on the demand side. And these are nothing to do with variability of renewable energy sources. So if we shift the load, and then there's the second shifting summer loads to off-peak months. So that's the second peak. You know, we did the economic math. To cool the country just because of rising heat index, from the coolest month of January to the peak of April and May, we need 3.3 gigawatts of additional power. So if we cool the country more efficiently, then we can shave a sizable portion of the 3.3 gigawatt only due to heat index and not because of any other economic activity. So I just want to get your views on permanent shifting and follow the example of Germany, where energy efficiency is plugged in their energy plan as a resource. So are we in a 10-year journey? Is it a 5-year journey to see energy efficiency plugged in because of the several gigawatts impact they may have on our energy plan? Thank you.
You know that there is already a law, and there is a lag time between the enactment of the law and the compliance of the people. And the government, you know, wanting to give a very good example, we're actually having what we call the Government Energy Management Program, which is the GAMP. And we have shown last year that there is an impact on the cost of energy that's being spent by the government. Ang laki ng reduction from 2022 to 2023. And the targets being set by the department for the government is higher even for the year 2024. You know, once the regulators or the policymakers walk the talk, we would be able to have more ways of asking the private sector to comply. So I imagine what you described, that is going to happen maybe 5 years down the road, but not immediate. And what we've seen during the time of our red and yellow alerts in summer was that people were also responding. They learned that, pag nag-announce ng yellow alert, you better make sure that you shift the time of use of heavy equipment during the off-peak hours. May natural na ganun eh. We could see it from the load curves eh. But I wish we could actually set the targets. We could only set up to 2040 that it's going to be like this, but earlier years we cannot. We're in the learning process still.
Sir, I just wanted to address the point on the TOU, on the time of use price, because we are reviewing the time of use pricing, which is currently the NPC time of use price. So you can imagine how dated that is, no? So nakita ko si Prof. Nani also eh. But we're reviewing that so that it can be another tool, not just to be used for ineligible contracts, because right now, the time of use price is your proxy price for contracts that are being implemented but not approved by ERC. But the time of use pricing can also be used precisely for what you said, encouraging behavior and certain behavior. And energy efficiency is really, to me, I champion you, sir, because it's a very hard advocacy, I think, because it requires behavior shifting. And to change behavior, there has to be something inside a person to change his behavior, right? There are incentives to encourage, but for it to be sustainable, there has to be a real change in behavior. So we're hoping a new time of use pricing can encourage that, but also promotion of what we had said earlier on consumer, or what we call in the commission, consumer choice programs. ARCOA is one, but the other program is net metering and GEOP, the Green Energy Option Program. And again, light at the end of the tunnel or bright spot, the net metering program has really taken off. And for last year, for 2023, we have doubled the number of net metering customers in the country. First time that it has increased by 121% year on year. So I think the unsung heroes also for the summer experience we all had, that will go down in history as the tough summer of 2024. Not just the ILP consumers, but also the net metering consumers, because they have been helping to absorb some of that pressure from the grid by self-providing. And I think we sometimes take that for granted, that there are those customers that are also self-providing. So maybe those parallel efforts, the time of use to encourage behavior, and really greater promotion of net metering programs.
Good afternoon. My name is Roy Moreno. I'm the chairman of the Ease of Doing Business Committee. And we work very closely with ARTA, of course. I have 2 points. One is the fact that I think we should also be aware of what DTI is doing in terms of promotions. What are the industries that they keep promoting to come and invest, like these data centers that they're talking about? Today, yesterday, the president said, we should have a steel plant, etc., etc. So when you go at that, one of the things that we have to do then is to have a very competitive pricing of power. And so perhaps what should be considered is really targeted subsidies. If you say, well, we want to build up the data center industry, we will give you subsidies to be competitive vis-a-vis Vietnam or Malaysia. but it has to be very well managed. So I think that is something we should consider. Secondly, we should also consider, as MAP and also DOE, the issue of energy conservation. We all keep talking about, how to manage the load, how to manage this and that. But nobody talks about energy conservation the way it was under the, maybe you'll say it's old-fashioned thinking, but the way it was during the first Marcos presidency. So, and if I remember correctly, that was led by the government. I'm sorry. ENERCON, sorry, energy conservation. Thank you, Yusek. So, say that's something that we should also look into. And I think that should probably be led by DOE in terms of, drumming up the interest and seeing how to bring in associations like MAP. Thank you.
Thank you. Last question. Sorry, we're running out of time.
Thank you. I'm Ed Francisco from BDO. Chair, Mona, I wanted to check lang because when you said the banks were not lending, I was taken aback because we are actually lending. Sagad nga kami with the people in the front. So where is that coming from? In fact, not just BDO, but unfortunately, I think I have no competition here, but that's sorry for them. But we actually stop short of we stop our bond offerings early for green bonds, blue bonds, etc. because we don't have enough borrowers. So why are you saying there's not enough lending? We don't have enough projects. The banks are overcapitalized.
I was taking off po from Yusek Gev's point that local financing, I think yun po yung point. Local financing for REs have been, the reaction or the appetite is not there for financing. So maybe different experience from you guys, but
to me, please. Yeah.
Two points, sir. But thank you, Sir Ed, for that. One, I'll let Yusek give address the point on that one. But I raised the point on financing with respect to the challenge earlier posed by Donna, which is very valid and I think repeated also earlier when the question of Eric was, or the point made by Eric was, once our COA goes down to the household level, there are no 20-year PPAs at the household level. So if banks are used to long-term, not even 20 ngayon, pwede na lang 15. So, not even 15-year PPAs with a single off-taker. Wala kang single off-taker doon. But we are allowing aggregation under the new rules that we are issuing, waiting for publication. But that's a different environment na po tayo. So, that was my point in raising the banks.
Okay.
From our point of view, yung renewable energy developers, hindi sila makautang sa local banks kasi hindi PSA pa rin yung hinahanap ng mga banks eh. Walang PSA eh, iba na yung usapan. So, nagpumayag naman ang Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, papatawag nila yung mga bangko sa August to educate them about how to finance renewable energy projects.
No, ma'am, I think the DBP is already doing that. Merchant, hindi kailangan ng PSA. So about 60-40 yung debt equity ratio for Luzon, and then Visayas 50-50. So if you want to check that out. Anyway, di ako makapasok sa last question, but someone sent me this. Umalis na si Bert Delusong. So he said, thank you, Yusek Gev, for revealing the real cause of the lack of supply, and that is forced outages. Ahead of your formal study, what is the real cause of these forced outages? Looking at operating graphs of all baseload power plants, even those showing enough periods of maintenance still have forced outages. Thank you, Chair Mona, for the insight on the lag between coal price reductions and power prices. You cited Indonesian prices, but most coal power supply contracts use Newcastle prices. You also pointed to the need to verify cost, but aren't coal power supply contracts based only on the Newcastle price index? Thus, the only verification needed is to have the proper index, not the actual cost. My question moving forward, will ERC require future contracts to be based on actual fuel cost?
Thank you. That's a very valid point on Newcastle. But I think we need, for better appreciation, there have been contracts approved by ERC that you are correct, based on index only, but very few of them. A lot are index or actual, whichever is lower. So that's why there is really a need for the DU to review, because there are different rules that would apply and that would be applicable and that were approved, terms that were approved by the ERC. That's the first point. So it's contract to contract, magkakaiba po siya. Although now we're standardizing it. The second point is that why are most of them are using Newcastle, why are we using Indonesian coal? Very interesting question. Because previous, of course, we will not, if it's already with final authority, we will not disturb the final authority. If the previous commissions have approved Newcastle, even knowing that 98% of the imports in the Philippines come from Indonesia, if it was already approved by the commission, we cannot do anything about it. But moving forward, that's one of the reality checks that we want to do for contracts. And this, I'm glad that, our private DUs are here, Meralco and some of the DUs of represented by Aboitiz. Why would you accept a PSA that is indexed in Newcastle if the supply is coming from Indonesia, right? So it's one question that we are also grappling with, and we hope that the DUs should grapple with when they do their CSP, because you cannot just accept it, whatever is the offer to you.
I think Danelle wants to say something. Danelle?
Chair Mona, if I can just answer that question. I think there was no distinction between ICI and Nuke in the past, and Nuke was more liquid. But now, with this recent turn of events, Nuke has become problematic for all the reasons you have mentioned. So we're actually, both as a generator and as a distributor, switching to ICI. But some contracts already exist. And I'll say that there's a general parang aversion to making any changes to regulated contracts, because that opens us up to regulation. Interestingly, in the retail space, we've had a mixed reception. Some customers are happy to move to ICI, whereas other customers have been resistant to that move. They want to stay with Nuke. So we're getting a mixed feedback. And I guess the last point I was going to make is we find ICI 4 in particular tracks well for low CV coal plants. A lot of the new plants that we have, and by we I mean us in this room, but the older plants that are burning high CV coal, parang Nuke is still advantageous for those coal supply agreements. Thank you.
Okay, on that note, thank you very much to our panelists, our moderator. And can we have yes, diba? Did you enjoy that? We should do this all the time. Anyway, photo op, please. Can you please stand over here for the